Hello, this is Pastor Patrick Hines. Welcome to today's program. And I like Rich put that that thumbnail with me with a 4th of July hat on. I thought that was kind of funny. But happy 4th of July, everyone. And welcome to today's program. If you enjoy this channel, make sure you like the videos and subscribe to the channel and post links on social media and all the other places on the internet that I have no accounts for, like Facebook and Twitter and whatever else is out there. Please do post and share the videos. I know that a lot of people see these, and it's very encouraging when I get feedback and emails and things like that. People that are being helped and encouraged to dig into their Bibles and to study the only source of God speaking that we have in the world today, and that is the written word of the living God in the Bible. Now, today I want to talk about Job and Joseph. And the reason I picked those two for a study of God's purposes in human suffering is because I think the two of them represent two different kinds of suffering. There's suffering that we endure because of mistreatment by other people. And then there's suffering that we endure that seems to be really fortuitous. It really seems to be, it's obviously not random, but it's not really someone that we know or someone that is hurting us. But a lot of Job's suffering that he endures is not really like the suffering that Joseph did. So first, I want to talk about Joseph. Now, Joseph was the 11th son of Jacob. He was the son of the first son that he had with his wife Rachel. Remember Joseph or just Jacob before his name was changed to Israel. He wanted to marry Rachel and was tricked by Laban into marrying Leah first, the older sister of Rachel. And then he ends up married to both of them. And imagine that being being a polygamist, not only a polygamist, but being married to two women who are sisters. And that's the life that Jacob lived. And eventually, because Rachel and Leah were competing with each other as to who could have more children, they brought their maidservants into the action there, and Jacob ends up with four wives. Zilpah and Bilhah were their names. So he has 12 children, and eventually, barren Rachel is able to conceive and gives birth to Joseph, and then later conceives one more time and gives birth to Benjamin, and she dies during a childbirth with Benjamin. And what a terrible thing. I always think how hard that must have been on on Jacob, because he really just wanted to be married to Rachel. He never wanted to be married to Leah or to these other two women. Rachel was the one that he loved, and that's the one God took from him. And so very often, that's the way it goes at times for God's people. He will give and he will take away, just like he did with Job. Now Joseph was an extraordinary person. Joseph really is to me. He's kind of in a league of his own. He's right up there with Job, and there's a couple other guys in the Old Testament who are so special, at least from what's recorded about them in terms of how godly they were. Daniel is another one who is just so special. Joseph, Job, and I know there's others that I'm leaving out, but Joseph is just an extraordinary person. Now, Joseph was favored by his father because he was the son of Rachel, the wife out of the four wives, the one that he really loved, the one that Jacob really loved. So Joseph comes on the scene here, and Joseph is very handsome. We know that from his time in Egypt. He was a very good-looking man, and Jacob gave him a coat of many colors. He gave him a tunic that was beautiful. It was beautifully colored, and he didn't give this to his other sons. And so this just fostered the depth of their jealousy. It's always a terrible thing if a father or mother has more than one child, and one of them or two of them or three of them seem to be their favorite. That can really be devastating. children if they feel like they're not the favorite. But this was rather over the top. Joseph, beginning in Genesis 37, is clearly the favorite of the dad. In fact, it even says there, verse 3. Now Israel, that was what Jacob's name was changed to after he wrestled with the angel of the Lord all night earlier in Genesis. Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. So favoritism in families is a bad thing. It can cause a lot of very deep-seated feelings to come to the surface. Now, another thing about Joseph is Joseph has these dreams and shares the dreams that he has with his father and his brothers. And you remember the dreams that he has. He dreams. It says here, "Please hear this dream. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. And behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed, your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf." His brother said to him, "Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. And then he has another dream. He says, "Look, I have dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me." So he told it to his father and his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" And if you know your Old Testament, that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what ends up happening. Yes, mom and brothers and everybody comes and bows down to Joseph when he's the vizier there in Egypt, second in command in Egypt. Okay, so then you get the plot of Joseph's brothers want to kill him at first. They're actually planning on killing their brother Joseph, but thankfully Reuben talks them out of it, and they end up selling Joseph into slavery to some Ishmaelites that come, and then they take Joseph down to Egypt. Now, Joseph's suffering was inflicted by his family. And for a lot of people, that can be a real serious thing. The suffering that's inflicted by family can often be very hard to forgive, very hard to overcome. And I think we see that here. Now, this is real different from Job. We know the story with Job is very, very different. Job, of course, is a godly man. He's an upright man. He's God fearing. He shuns evil, and we know from Job chapter 1, Satan, the devil, the Hebrew ha Satan, the adversary, comes among the sons of God and presents himself there before God. And God says, "Have you considered my servant Job? That there's none like him in all the earth, the one who shuns evil and is good and righteous and everything." And the devil tries to show God that the only reason Job really loves him is because he is protected from harm by a hedge of protection, God's sovereign protection of Job. And but you let me strike what Job has, and he'll curse you to your face. So God says, "Okay, you can do whatever you want. You have free reign, and but you can't touch him, just what he has." And so short time later, Job loses everything. Job loses all of his wealth. All of his servants are killed. All of his livestock is stolen. All 10 of his children die in one day. And Joseph simply says, "God gives, God takes away. Naked I came from my mother's womb. Naked I shall return. We come into the world with nothing. We depart with nothing. And so the Lord shall be praised." So then Satan comes again and says, God says, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there's none like him in all the earth, one who does good and follows after good and shuns evil?" Okay, and then Satan says this ominous phrase. He says, "Skin for skin," in Job 2, verse 4. "Yes, all that a man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face." And Yahweh says to Satan, "Behold, he is in your hand, but spare his life." So Satan goes out from the presence of the Lord and strikes Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And then Job's wife comes along, says, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die." But he says to her, "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God? And shall we not accept adversity?" In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. I was having a conversation with someone here at church about this recently, this past week, and just saying, if I knew someone that this kind of calamity happened to, I would wonder the same things Job's friends wondered. I would wonder, what did he do? What did he do to anger God to such an extent? And yet we know from the narrative here, Job didn't do anything. Now, Job was a sinner just like we are, but this is not divine retribution for anything he did. And yet I'm not aware of anyone outside of the Lord Jesus himself who suffered like this. I'm not aware of anyone who endured the loss of all their property. And of course, because everyone back then mostly had a mechanical view of suffering. Well, if you're suffering, you must have made God mad. You must be evil. Job's reputation suffers because of this. His wife is not supporting him. We don't know if she left him or anything. She might not have, but she tells him to curse God and die. Okay, not a real supportive wife here. So Job is left friendless, childless, bankrupt, and dying. His health is completely destroyed. And he's covered from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head with the shachane. That term boils. It's the same word for boils in the Egyptian plague, the boils that God brought on the Egyptians. Same thing here, except Job is covered with them from head to toe. Now, I want to get back to the Joseph story. I think one of the main things I want to emphasize here is, before I get back to the Joseph story, the Joseph narrative there. Listen to First Peter chapter 1, First Peter 1, verses, I believe it's 6 and following. "In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials, that the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ." Why are we grieved by various trials? Whether it's, God forbid, being sold into slavery for 13 years, like Joseph was, or God simply removing the hedge of protection around us and allowing free reign of the devil and the agents of darkness to afflict us with every kind of suffering. What is the point of that? Why does God allow this? It's right there in verse 7, First Peter 1, verse 7. If you want a verse to meditate on, if you're suffering, and really there's probably never really a moment that you're not living in this world that is, as Augustine called it, a veil of tears. Why does God allow us to be grieved? Why does he decree and plan that we would be grieved by trials? That the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So the trials, all the various kinds of trials, whether they're inflicted on us by family members, by people, or by God simply removing protection from us, they are to strengthen our faith like gold is refined in fire. Now you think about the refining process for gold. When people would find gold, they would find it, a vein of gold in rocks and in the ground and things like that. And what they would do is they put it in a really, really, really hot fire, because fire will burn away all of the impurities that are still attached to the gold. But gold is indestructible, at least in this life. But the passage there makes the comment, the Holy Spirit pointing out gold that perishes. Okay, gold, yeah, is indestructible in this life, but your faith is more precious than gold that perishes, because true faith never perishes. True faith that is divinely given from God is only made stronger when it's burned, when it's tried, when it's tested by fire. So why did Joseph go through everything he went through in the iron furnace of Egypt, being a lone believer all by himself there, a church of one in a pagan land, one of the darkest nations that's ever existed, ancient Egypt. And there he is in Potiphar's house, and he's a man of integrity. And Potiphar knows he's a man of integrity. Potiphar entrusts everything that he has to Joseph. And then Potiphar's wife, sees Joseph's a very handsome guy, and she starts hitting on him and starts trying to seduce him and everything else. And eventually Joseph has to get out of the house and run away, and she's got his garment. She lies about him, and says that he was the aggressor in that. And he ends up in jail. And you think, what is this poor guy thinking now? I know if I was Joseph, I'd be thinking, God, do you hate me or something? My own brothers, when they threw me down in that pit, I heard them talking about me. I heard them talking about killing me. I begged them not to sell me off into slavery too. I had tears, dirt-stained tears running down my face. And my brothers showed me no pity. They sold me off into slavery, and then they watched me disappear into the horizon. Do you not care about me anymore? Do you not love me anymore? And then he's in Potiphar's house. He's doing his work. I'm sure it wasn't very nice work being a slave. He's probably doing the gross, menial tasks of a house every day, and yet he still has a really good attitude. He's clinging to God, clinging to God's promises, maintaining his integrity. And then a woman starts coming on to him, and he gets lied about and thrown into prison. And then what happens to him in prison? He shows integrity there. The people that Joseph ran into could see something was different about him. The Lord, they could tell. The true God, if there is one, is definitely with this guy. We can see it because everything he does, he's good at. Everything he does, he has integrity. Everything he does good work. We can completely trust him. He's honest. He has integrity. He works hard. The prison overseer understood that. He entrusted everything in that jail to Joseph. What happened to Joseph because of these trials? His faith shined brighter. His faith was made to shine even brighter. It was like the gold that's refined in the furnace, and the bits and pieces of sin and doubt and unbelief are burned away by trials. It's just like, when I was in high school, I played football, and I knew that you have to work out. You got to work out. You got to work hard in the off season if you're going to be a good player. And so you put yourself through that pain. You put yourself through the hard stuff so that you've got strength. It says in the Proverbs, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. When we were doing 2-a-day football practices in August in Cincinnati, Ohio, you might think, well, that's a little bit farther north. Cincinnati, Ohio is the city of extremes when it comes to weather. It's like there's 2 feet of snow in the winter, and then it gets above 96 degrees and stays there for the whole month of August. And we'd be out there running wind sprints and doing drills with all of our football equipment on, and our coach kept telling us, oh, don't worry, guys, you're going to feel like Superman on Friday night when that cool air. He was right. He put us through really hard conditioning so that we'd be like Superman on Friday nights. That's what God does. He doesn't want us to have weak faith. He doesn't want us to stumble along through life and, succumb to every temptation that comes to it. He's going to put us through the furnace. He's going to put us through the furnace of fire to burn off all that other stuff so that the gold of our faith will shine brighter and be more pure. Joseph was probably immature. He probably, as a younger man, he's one of the youngest of 12. So all of these brothers are older than him that hated him. He's the youngest. He's the baby. He probably didn't handle it very well. In fact, we know from Genesis 37 that Joseph brought a bad report of his brothers. There's probably some bitterness going both ways there. So Joseph, although he was definitely special and he definitely was a man with a heart of gold, I think he went into the furnace of trial somewhat immature, but he emerged as a spiritual giant. He went into Egypt, pretty good guy. He came out completely different person. And folks, what you need to understand is Jesus taught about this as well in the Gospels. He spoke about tribulation and trials because of the word of God. He says, he who receives the seed on stony places, this is he who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but endures only for a while. For when tribulation or persecution arises because of the word, immediately he stumbles. Trials also, please hear me, make a mental note of this. Trials also reveal who true Christians are and who fake ones are. Trials and tribulations reveal who true believers really are. If someone is not a true believer, and they have trials, tribulations, it'll harden them. They'll turn their back on God. Hey, I tried God, and when I needed him the most, he failed me, and the bottom fell out of my life, and this happened or that happened. So, oh well, I don't want anything to do with God anymore. Trials in the life of a Christian who has divinely given faith from on high, from God, their faith will be stronger for the trial. When tribulation or persecution arises because of the word, they will be stronger as a result. They will not stumble. They will not stumble. Their faith will be stronger. Joseph had a lot of testing, a lot of fire that he went through, unjustly put in prison. And then he interprets the baker and the butler's dreams. Remember that? The dreams he interprets, and then one of them is executed, the other one is restored to his position by by Pharaoh. And he forgot about Joseph. Joseph even told the guy, please tell somebody that it's not right that I'm down here. I'm falsely accused. Please tell someone to get me out of here. Yeah, sure, I'll do it. And he forgets about him. So he's stuck there. Probably for several years, he was in prison. But then Pharaoh has a dream. Pharaoh has a dream about 7 skinny cows eating 7 fat cows. And he doesn't know what it means. And then the baker, as I recall, it's the baker. Is that right? The baker, and they're in Genesis. Yeah, it is. Butler Baker. In Egypt, in the prison. Yeah, they had their dreams, and then it's the baker. No, is it the butler? I can't remember. Yeah, okay. When Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, both me and the chief baker. Okay, so it was the butler who was restored. Sorry, Mr. Baker. The baker got killed, I guess. The butler was restored, but then he remembers, oh yeah, there was this guy in prison that interpreted my dream, and he was exactly right, a young Hebrew man with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. And we told him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. To each man he interpreted according to his own dream. And it came to pass, just as he interpreted for us. So it happened. He restored me to my office, and he hanged him. Okay, so the butler was restored, the chief baker was hanged, just like Joseph said. So Pharaoh was really upset that he couldn't understand his dream. He couldn't understand the dream. And so the butler remembers Joseph. Oh, yeah, there's this Hebrew guy in jail. So that's how Joseph finally gets out of prison. He interprets the dream. There's going to be 7 really great years of harvest, followed by 7 years of famine. And then eventually, as you know the story, the famine hits the whole world. And they've got plenty of food because they listened to Joseph. They stored up lots and lots and lots of grain so they'd be able to get through the 7 years of famine. And eventually Jacob sends his sons, well, I've heard that there's food down there in Egypt. Here's a bunch of money. Here's some stuff. Go get us some food. Now, I want to focus on why I've said repeatedly that Joseph was a spiritual giant at the end of all this testing, after all these trials and all this unbelievable heartache, and week after week, month after month, year after year of being a slave in Potiphar's house and then being unjustly imprisoned. When I preached on this, I figured from trying to look at it carefully, probably about 13 years that went on. 13 years of this. And when Joseph sees his brothers again, when he sees his brothers, he tests them to find out, are they changed men or not? Are they really repentant or not? And I want to read the passage where Joseph finally can't stand it any longer, and he finally reveals himself. Genesis 45. Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Does my father still live?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. I would love to see a snapshot of what their faces looked like when they realized it's Joseph. It's our brother who's been interacting with us all this time. Joseph said to his brothers, Genesis 45, verse 4, "Please come near to me." So they came near. Then he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life." What kind of metal is this man made out of? To have been betrayed on the level that he was by all of his older brothers, by all 10 of them who were plotting to kill him. And then they said, okay, let's not kill him. Let's just sell him into slavery. And here he is. He's there and he's suffered all this time because of them. But this man's faith is so strong now because of all that fire, all that testing, that he realizes what God's purpose really was. God sent me before you to preserve life. To me, that's one of the most astounding acts of God's grace in all of Scripture. The very sin that those brothers committed against their brother was the means by which he would save their lives from starvation. They don't sell Joseph off into slavery. No one's there to interpret Pharaoh's dreams, and therefore they're not going to store up grain, and therefore everyone's going to die of starvation. And it all goes back. It all goes back to their sinful, wicked scheme, first to kill Joseph, but then to sell him off into slavery. He says, the next verse, Genesis 45:6, he's still talking to his brothers that he just revealed himself to. "For these 2 years the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt." Isn't that amazing? Everything in me, if I was Joseph, and obviously my faith's nothing like his, I'd be like, every one of you get down on the ground and give me 100 push. Everything in me would want to take vengeance on them for 13 years of misery for what they did to me. But you see, Joseph recognized the hand of God in all of it. God had preserved him. God had protected him. Yeah, he ended up in jail. Yeah, he ended up as a slave. Yeah, he suffered in all these ways. He was forgotten and left to rot in prison. And there must have been times that while he was in prison, he thought, I might end my days in this prison. Month after month, year after year, I'm still sitting here, unjustly in prison. God, what's going to happen here? We're grieved by various trials, that the genuineness of our faith would be shown, that the genuineness of our faith would be even more genuine, more strong, like gold burned in the furnace. For God's children, there's no such thing as purposeless suffering. All suffering is an opportunity to cling more to God. And Joseph was made into a spiritual giant by a terrible furnace of affliction that lasted for years and years and years, as a slave in Potiphar's house and then unjustly imprisoned. But when he finally has his chance, when he finally faces the men who did this to him, when he finally gets to see their faces, when the tables have turned and he's second most powerful man probably on this planet and could have every one of these guys put to death for what they did, what does he do? He shows them grace. He shows them mercy. In fact, he comforts them. He tells them, don't be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me to save your lives. What kind of metal is this man made of? You want to know why we suffer? Why does God put us through these trials that, push us to the edge of our sanity at times? Because he loves us. He doesn't want us to have weak faith. He doesn't want us to stumble along and not be sure, is God really there? Does he really love me? Do I really have eternal life? Is the finished work of Christ really going to save me? He wants that faith to shine bright. He wants your good deeds to shine before men, that they may see them and glorify him. I can't imagine the testimony that Joseph bore witness to there in Egypt. Everyone around him knew the Lord is with him. The true God, whoever the true God is with this guy. We've never met anybody like this. How could anyone be this gracious? How can anyone be willing to forgive the way that he is? And then it goes on from there. He tells them, go get my father. I want to see my father. And I want to see everybody. Bring them all here. And they come and, Jacob comes. And Jacob, and the way he introduces himself to Pharaoh is pretty soul stirring to see. Genesis 47 verse 9. Here's Jacob's introduction to Pharaoh. Here's how he introduces himself. He says, "The days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life. And they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers and the days of their pilgrimage." Jacob was 135 when he died. 135. His father, Isaac, was 185 when he died. Abraham was 175 when he died. Jacob only lived to be 135. I think the stress of being married to 4 women, and the stress of all the things his sons did. Remember, Levi and Simeon go to the town of Shechem after one of the princes there rapes their sister Dinah, and they murdered all the men there after they told them to get circumcised first. That stressed Jacob out. I think that shortened Jacob's life after finding out, really, you guys took swords and killed every man in that city? That must have been a hard day. The fact that he was married to 4 women, the fact that he thought for years and for all those years, they brought the coat of many colors after they dipped it in the blood of a goat and said, hey, Dad, is this your son's tunic? It is. Oh, he's been torn to pieces by a wild beast. And he mourns and weeps and mourns and weeps. Jacob didn't live as long because of the stress in his life. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life. How would you look at someone who introduced themselves? Yeah, I'm Patrick. Few and evil have been the days of my life, and I'm not going to live as long as my father's either. You would think, man, he's a downer. But the guy's life was just filled with stress and with trials, and it was a tough thing. And you think, man, God really loved him? Yes, he loved him. What about Joseph? God really loved Joseph? You think Joseph felt loved by God when he was 6 months into his first years In prison, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, day after day after day after day. No sign of anything changing anytime soon. Joseph was put through a furnace of trial, and he became a spiritual giant through it. So much so, he forgave his brothers. He forgave them, and he didn't hold this against them. And it's incredible. It's absolutely amazing the way the whole narrative ends in Genesis 50 after the death of uh, Israel, of Jacob himself. His name was changed to Israel. They weep. In Genesis 49, you have all those prophecies about each of the boys and their future, and there's a messianic prophecy about Judah. And it's wonderful stuff to read and study. I preached through the whole book of Genesis years ago. I'm actually working on editing those sermons, but alas, there are only so many hours in the day. Listen here. What goes on next here? Genesis 50. After Jacob dies, it says here in verse 15 of Genesis 50, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "Perhaps Joseph will hate us and may actually repay us for all the evil which we did to him." So they sent messengers to Joseph, saying, "Before your father died, he commanded, saying, 'Thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father.'" And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. The thing is, I don't know if we know for sure if Jacob actually said that to them. They might be lying about this. I had a conversation with my wife about it just recently. I'm not sure if they're lying or not, but either way, it didn't matter. It says, "And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also went and fell down before his face, and they said, 'Behold, we are your servants.' Joseph said to them, 'Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. Now therefore do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones.' And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them." See, folks, that's what ought to distinguish a Christian from a non-Christian. We don't think in terms of vengeance. Now, yes, I'm aware the Psalms are filled with imprecations against persecutors and against the wicked and everything else. But anytime someone is repentant, anytime someone wants our forgiveness, we need to extend that to them. And Joseph was a very uncommon person. He was a man with a supernaturally given heart for God. And because of that, he was able to forgive. He understood God's sovereignty over everything. He understood that God was the Lord of everything. And he could see that in going to Egypt and being able to interpret Pharaoh's dreams, even though it took years and years and years for him to get to that point, years and years of very hard suffering, he was willing to forgive his brothers when he had every opportunity to take vengeance on them. He spoke kindly to them. He told them not to be angry at themselves. He told them, "I will provide for you. You meant it for evil. God meant it for good. Please." You can tell he wants them to forget about it. Put it behind you. Let's be a family again. That's the way we should be. That's the way we should be. Eager, willing to forgive. Just as eager to forgive the father who runs down the road to meet the son who wasted all of his possessions with reckless living, partying, doing who knows what in a far country. That child comes to their senses. We want to be the first to forgive them. Now, at the end of the book of Job, Job does make a mistake. He does make a mistake, and he wants an audience with God. He wants God to explain himself. He wants God to answer some questions for him. He wants God to come into the dock and respond. Let me offer some questions for God here. And let me see if I can find that exact passage. Yeah, Job 29. He says here, let me see if I can find it. I chose the way. Yeah, he here at the end of Job. There's the thing happens where Elihu comes in there and speaks for a little while, and then the Lord finally answers Job. Job does demand an audience. Job wants to talk to God. He wants God to answer some of his questions, and after really trying to exonerate himself and pointing out, look, here it is, Job 31 verse 33. Listen to this, Job 31:33. Job says, if I have covered my transgressions as Adam by hiding my iniquity in my bosom, because I feared the great multitude and dreaded the contempt of families, so that I kept silence and did not go out of the door. Oh, that I had one to hear me. Here is my mark. Oh, that the Almighty would answer me, that my prosecutor had written in a book. Surely I would carry it on my shoulder and bind it on me like a crown. I would declare to him the number of my steps. Like a prince, I would approach him. If my land cries out against me and its furrows weep together, if I have eaten its fruit without money or caused its owners to lose their lives, then let the thistles grow instead of wheat and weeds instead of barley. He's saying, look, if I did something wrong, then punish it. Let me know what it is and give me an appropriate punishment. And it says the words of Job are ended. But that's his mistake. Said, oh, that the Almighty would answer me. Job is saying, I want to know what's going on. I want to know why all this stuff has happened to me. Why did all 10 of my children, whom I have arisen early and offered sacrifices for and prayed for and taught the ways of God, why have they all died in one day? Why am I covered with boils? Why are people giving me such a hard time? Why is my heart completely broken? Why am I about to die? And the answer is just stunning. After Elihu's numerous speeches, Job 38:1, then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now prepare yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. What do we learn from this? Dear ones, anyone listening, it's a fool's errand to question God. It's a fool's errand to question God. God says to him, let me ask you some questions first, Job. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? To what were its foundations fastened? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst forth and issued from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, when I fixed my limit for it and set bars and doors, when I said, this far you may come, but no further, and here your proud waves must stop. Have you commanded the morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth, and the wicked be shaken out of it? And he goes on from there. He asks Job about all kinds of things in the natural world. Tell me about the treasury of snow. Have you entered the treasury of snow? Did you know that no two snowflakes are identical to each other? The six-pronged flakes that amazingly form and fall in their majestic beauty to the earth. Have you entered the treasury of snow, Job? Have you seen the treasury of hail? He goes on to there to ask them about, how about rain? Why don't you tell us about rain, Job? Tell us about rain and how it works. Tell us about animals and how they give birth. Tell me about the stars, Job. Did you put them up in the sky? I love the questions about animals. He asks him, why is it that certain kinds of animals are willing to serve? Verse 9 of chapter 39. Will the wild ox be willing to serve you? Will he be bed by your manger? Answer is no. Can you bind the wild ox in the furrow with ropes? Or will he plow the valleys behind you? Will you trust him because his strength is great? Or will you leave your labor to him? Will you trust him to bring home your grain and gather it to your threshing floor? The wings of the ostrich wave proudly, but are her wings and pinions like the kindly stork's? For she leaves her eggs on the ground and warms them in the dust. She forgets that a foot may crush them or that a wild beast may break them. She treats her young harshly as though they were not hers. Her labor is in vain without concern because God deprived her of wisdom and did not endow her with understanding. You see, what is God asking Job? Job, why don't you tell me how all these things work and why they are the way they are? Let me summarize it for you. We can't contend with the Almighty. We cannot contend with the Almighty. And he goes on. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and just all these questions. Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook? One of those mega underwater creatures. Hey, you go fishing for him, Job? Pull him out with a hook? Put a reed through his nose? Pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many supplications to you? Will he speak softly to you? Will he make a covenant with you? Will you take him as a servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird? He asks him about the animals, about behemoth, probably a sauropod, dinosaur. Amazing stuff. And then Job answers the Lord. I know you can do everything and that no purpose of yours can be withheld from you. You asked, who is this who hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore, I have uttered what I did not understand. What does he mean by that? I uttered what I did not understand. Oh, that the Almighty would answer me. God, you need to answer me. You need to explain yourself to me. Why is this stuff happening to me? Yeah, I spoke what I did not understand. Job 42, verse 4. Listen, please, and let me speak. You said, I will question you, and you shall answer me. And Job says, I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. Therefore, I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. And so it was, verse 7. After the Lord had spoken these words to Job, that the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, that's one of Job's friends who got it all wrong, my wrath is aroused against you and your two friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. Now therefore take for yourselves 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up for yourselves a burnt offering, and my servant Job shall pray for you. For I will accept him, lest I deal with you according to your folly, because you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. Job said everything that was correct about God and did not sin, but he did make an error there when he said, oh, the Almighty would answer me. I want an audience with God. I want God to explain himself to me. I want God to tell me why I'm suffering like this. I want the reasons for it. And God's answer is, well, why don't you tell me why everything in the whole universe is the way it is first? And you know what's the most soul-stirring thing about all this? God doesn't give Job an audience with him. And God doesn't answer the questions. God does not tell Job why this stuff happened. He doesn't say, well, Job, the devil came in among the sons of God and said that the only reason you love me is because how much I've blessed and protected you. So I quit blessing and quit protecting you for a while to see if you still love me. And you passed the test, Job. Good job. God never tells him. I think for many of us, we will die. We will die not knowing why a lot of things happen to us, why a lot of things happen to our families, why we suffered the way we did when we were children, why we suffered the way we did as adults, why we suffered the way we did with whatever illness kills us. My father died this past December 16th. In the last 4 or 5 years of his life, it was very hard to see. It was very hard to see the way that his illness took his life, to see the way kidney failure and dialysis and the heart problems that he had. And it was really awful. It was really awful to watch. And I wondered how I will handle however I die. I hope I handle it as well as he did, because he handled it very well. Why do we suffer? Why do we suffer? So that the genuineness of our faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. We suffer for a very different reason than unbelievers suffer. Unbelievers suffer either as a prelude to their judgment or to awaken them to their sin so that they can be effectually called and redeemed. But believers suffer for a far different purpose, to make our faith stronger Now you might be thinking, well, God must really want my faith to be stronger because of the stuff I'm going through or I've been through. I would encourage you to really try to see it that way. I don't know many people who have suffered the way Job did. I don't know many people that have been through the kinds of things that Joseph went through. But Joseph was able to forgive because his suffering forced him to have a much larger vision of the greatness of who God is. That's what happens. The people that I've known through the years, the older people who have suffered the most, tend to have the quietest of hearts in their resignation to the love of God and their trust in Him. People that suffer a lot tend to have a very, very strong faith and trust in the finished work of Jesus Christ. Now, I've prayed many times, Lord, you could just make me teachable. You could just make me more holy without this stuff. I mean, I could be sanctified laying in a hammock on the beach in Hawaii, sipping iced tea, taking naps, watching sunsets. That's true. But remember this: the Redeemer that we trust in is known as a man of sorrows in the old prophecy in Isaiah 53, a man of sorrows. And if we are going to be conformed to his image, the only time that we can be is in this world. And if he suffered, we're going to suffer too, to be made more like Jesus. Suffering makes us more like Christ because no one ever suffered more than he did. So we don't seek out suffering, we don't relish suffering, but we can have joy in the midst of it because we know that there's a divine purpose to it, and we know that God loves us through it. And it's his purpose that our faith would be stronger. And just like the athlete, you're not going to get the most out of an athlete unless you push them beyond what they would have done by themselves. That's what God does for us. He forces us to trust him, and that's how he makes our faith stronger so that we can live and die with a greater assurance of his love and a greater confidence in the finished work of our Lord Jesus Christ. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching or for listening.